kind of pointing to what you said, Louis, and kind of moving into the digital humanities. Jack sent me this
Link Jazz.
linked jazz, where you have pictures of jazz people and how they're linked together and supported by the source. Like the one I looked up was Philly guy, clarinetist. Huh?
Buddy
Buddy DeFranco. Buddy DeFranco, and how he was connected to Elliot Lawrence. And what supported it was a partial quote from an oral history with Elliot Lawrence saying how they were in a band together, and that was connected to the Smithsonian. But when you look at it, it looks insane. I mean, it looks like the solar system, and you have. So if you click on a venue, like if like for Faye, if she's got a venue like.
Say Downbeat.
Yeah, the Downbeat or whatever, and you click on that, then all at once you see all these heads of jazz musicians who played there and possibly when, and maybe what the ticket price was and who owned the place and yada yada yada, and then how how those musicians are connected to other musicians. I thought that was fascinating. Yeah, I really did.
I will send you all the link. It will blow your mind when you look. It's like this diagram of the universe with all these people and places connected. And then you click on one, as Suzanne said, and up will pop up, here's a photo, here's an oral history, here's...
You can look at his Wikipedia page.
And then you see that person or place, and then they lead you to 10 other people and places, and then their whole universe appears and all their interrelations. And this is all what's known as digital humanities, which is this emerging field in archives of using the electronic media to portray. It's just amazing. So
in a way, the archives could live at several different homes at the same time,
Most universities now do have like digital humanities centers. Like at Temple we do, and the Bloxham collection is under Temple University Libraries, and in the library system we have digital humanities, just like the press is under the library, Temple University Press.
Right.
So.
And it's good that it's under the library, because I remember in New Orleans, the Hogan Jazz Archives originally was in the history department before they moved it to the library.
Yeah.
And then it was able to get the funding necessary to preserve the information. So that's important. I think the preservation of this information, people provide us information, we need to be able to preserve it for them correctly.
We need to help people understand how to hold on to material. So one of the things that an archive could do was just share simple instructions and recommendations to people as to how to preserve paper, how to preserve materials that are sitting in boxes in basements or attics. Yeah.
That's very important, yeah.
and some of them don't think that
That's what folks
Most of
put
the stuff,
stuff in.
Yeah.
In the
That's where it
basement.
ends up.
That's really
And-
risky.
Well, but also not only how to
Yeah.
hold on to it, but what is archivable.
What
Right.
Letting people understand that, these letters that they really don't think much of might have great value in sharing this history.
I want to follow up on that specifically, because one of the things that we talked about in the grant proposal was that we're getting away from this canonization of jazz, which is that tendency to just focus on the great figures, right? The Dizzy Gillespies and the John Coltrane's from Philadelphia. What we're documenting is the jazz community that nurtured and gave birth to these guys. Even the sidemen, the sort of anonymous sidemen who maybe worked in obscurity all his life, we want those papers because we want to know what the community was like, all the corner bars and small clubs and private parties, and if they played at some little dive bar, that's all an important part of the overall story. So we want to document the entire community. And so if it is somebody who maybe isn't famous, but they have posters and letters of their career, that's as important as the papers of Dizzy Gillespie or something.
And emails. I just yesterday I was with Anisha Carney, Trudy Pitz's daughter, and she showed me an email that her mother sent her, and with lyrics on it, because she wanted to write a song for her children, because she wrote a song called Anisha, but she wanted to include her son in that, so she wrote the lyrics, and Anisha had it in her papers, and she took out the email and showed it to me, and I mean, that's a perfect thing. It's email, but it's something you'd want to preserve, and say, I wanted this to be something for all of you, rather than, you know. So that's another thing we have to think of, is that preserving emails, or Facebook posts, or, you know, there's been some real gems on Facebook of arguments between Philadelphia jazz musicians.
Well, speaking of arguments, I mean, how are you dealing with this question of, with the fact that some people are saying, don't call it jazz, or, you know, reject that identification or terminology?
If you look at jazz in a very historical way, that pops up every couple of decades, you know? Huh? Yeah, Miles did, and then, you know, I mean, so but it's a good point, yeah.
It's an important discussion to revisit, given that the origins of the music, geographically speaking, come from a place that had Jim Crow
That's right.
racism in place, where black people's bodies were categorized and erased and marginalized in very important ways. And so the development of the music is certainly mindful of that. So when you start to think about the 1920s in Manhattan, you know, white people from downtown going to Harlem, they're transgressing racial borders to do that, even if they're going to the Cotton Club, which
Right.
is only for white people.
Right.
So those sort of discursive ideas about race and class and place are embedded in the music all the time.
Well, it even goes to what Diane did her dissertation on, which was the Black Musicians Union and the tussle legally with the white union and all
Right.
that integration business. I mean, that, again, I can see like a line going from that to that.
Funniest
Yeah.
anecdote I ever heard was that it was JASS, and I think everybody
Right.
kind of agrees on that.
Right.
But vandals would erase the J, so instead of jazz tonight, you know, and so then they changed the Z's just because.
But that's
people-
not exactly true.
I said it was an anecdote, yeah.
Because what really was the case is it didn't have a standard spelling at first, but you can find the two Z's just as far back as you can find the two S's. So it's just one of those goofy stories.
Well, what's interesting is that all of this is apocryphal, which means that people were always negotiating about
Right.
what to call it.
Yeah.
Now, Mr. Adams, when I interviewed him and I asked him about that, and he said that it's all black music, that, you know, any terms that are put on it, it's to commercialize it. But if you go back to the spirituals, the hollers in the field, you'll see connections all the way up.
Right.
Sure.
And then Mr. C said, you know, in terms of the origins of jazz, he said that wherever you had a black urban population, jazz emerges, not just in New Orleans. So.
But, you know, again, I think this is all, there's activity associated with this that can be part of the archive.
Absolutely.
as well.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, you know, it's.
Well, but that's why Jack's point about including people that didn't make records is so important, because I tell my students all the time, jazz is ephemeral. So the thing is, there are people that never made records who, when you go into the oral history, are really important to how the music developed, down to specific techniques that other musicians borrowed from. We need to be the archive needs to be responsive to that, because if we can get those stories, that's something that they don't have in New York. New York really still sort of privileges records over everything else.
And oftentimes it had to do with race. You know, like when you look at the first recorded jazz music, it had to do with race.
Right?
You know, the
Right.
jazz musicians didn't have that access to that or the privilege to be able to record.